Hey, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I'm here with L Soares, who is a horror author. He is a 2013 Stoker Award winner for his first novel, Life Rage.
Yeah,
And
I don't know if
yes, you
yeah,
can see it
you
now.
can see it. Yeah.
That's
Um it's actually out of print right now, but this is the version.
yeah, which is amazing. Your first novel. That must have been
Yeah.
incredible. How did it
It
feel
was
to win
cool.
that?
Yeah, the really funny thing is my best friend also was nominated that same year for his first novel. In fact, he kind of turned me on to the publisher. So it was kind of weird to go be up against your best friend. But a lot of people were coming up to the table and talking to him and saying, "Oh, you're gonna win" and stuff like that. So I actually thought I didn't think I was gonna win. And then when I did, it was kind of a surprise. But it was kind of a an odd situation. It was cool. It was
Oh,
great that we were both nominated anyway.
that's amazing. So that's great. So you've
And his
also
name is Peter Dudar. I don't know if he's one of the people you're going to be interviewing, but
I don't believe so, but I think he might have written a blog. So, so you've also written stories, a number of stories in magazines and anthologies and things like that.
yeah.
But you've written four novels, I believe.
Um, five so far. I mean,
Five.
let's see. All right, so there's Life Rage. There's Rock and Roll, which was my second novel. Hard, which is more like a crime fiction novel. Buried in Blue Clay. And then my most recent one is Teach Them How to Bleed, which is a vampire novel that came out in 2023.
2043. Okay. So, for readers unfamiliar with your work, how would you describe what it is that you write?
Um, I write horror. I'm very into characters and developing the characters, making them as well fleshed out as I can. Um, I have in the past tried to focus on like ideas I thought were original, that were, something unusual that people hadn't read before. But the most recent novel, I thought I would try something that was a little more familiar to some people, vampires, but it is my take on them, and they're a little more unusual than the standard traditional type. Um, and I guess I'll put it this way. I don't write extreme violent horror, but I do write mainstream horror that is on the cusp. Like not going past it to become extreme, but as far as I can go while trying to manipulate the mainstream.
Okay. So, what can readers expect from your latest book?
Well, in 2023, I had two books come out. One of them is Teach Them How to Bleed, which is it's kind of like an ensemble book about a bunch of different characters who become vampires and who have different reactions to it. One guy wants revenge on the people who did it to them. Another person feels like a woman feels a new sense of power that she never had before, and it just goes into the different mindsets and so forth. The other book that came out in 2023 was a story collection of mine called Something Blue and Other Colorful Deaths. And this is a career spanning collection that starts out with my very first professional sale in 2001, and it goes all the way up to a couple of new stories that haven't been published before. So I had those two things come out. And then in this year, 2024, it's been kind of quiet. But hopefully I'll have some new things soon.
Okay. So, what do you think draws readers to these kinds of books?
Um, well, I think a lot of it might be some people it's catharsis because of anger or life doesn't always go the way we want it to, and they just, it gives people an outlet. I think other people are drawn to horror because it's like kind of like experiencing something scary or dangerous, but at the same time it's safe because it's fiction. And I think that there's a lot of different reasons, but I have heard that in Republican um administrations, for some reason horror it becomes more popular. And I have noticed recently, um with from movies. There's more horror movies now than there ever were before. And horror fiction does seem to be having a renaissance right now. And it's actually being taken a little more seriously. There's actually a New York Times column that reviews horror novels that wasn't around before. So I'm thinking maybe the genre is getting a little more respect now, and it's getting a lot more attention than it had recently. So hopefully that will continue.
I know in the past it was way in the past it was like pulp or whatever. It was terrible.
The 80s was this time period when like there was like a huge glut of horror, like there was so much of it, and then it kind of like faded out a little bit, and it just comes and goes in cycles. So right now is a good cycle. So that's
Hmm.
seems to be going pretty well.
Brought you to writing horror.
Um, When I was a little kid, I saw the movie Frankenstein on um, I forgot the name of the show, but it was like on Channel 5 in Boston. They showed some old movies. And maybe I was like 5 or 6. And even then when I saw it, I said, I want to do that. Like I didn't know how I would do it, but I wanted to have something to do with horror. And it was like the first thing that I ever really became really interested in and really loved as far as, you know, a genre or anything really. And I watched all the movies I could, and I read about them, and eventually started reading fiction as well. And horror was just like my first love. So that was something that has gone throughout my life. I have gone through periods where I've written science fiction and more crime fiction kind of stuff. And I do love things that everything I do is tinged in darkness, but horror was always the number one.
Okay. So what was the inspiration for teaching them how to bleed?
Like I said, I wanted to do a vampire novel that was a little bit different. No fangs, no capes, bats, none of that traditional stuff. It's more like these people. First of all, to become a vampire is a very violent situation where you're almost like beaten to death. So it takes kind of like the the sparkly vampire, the thing where like things aren't so scary and stuff, and tries to put the scares back in. Also, um, the vampires, instead of having fangs, they all have a different way of taking blood. Like for one woman was a junkie, and she gets all these little needles on her skin that draw blood. Another person has like suction cups, kind of like leeches, and it's kind of like each person has their own individual way of feeding, which I thought would be something a little different. So that was kind of what I was
Definitely.
going for there.
That
Yeah,
is different. Yeah. So did you have to do any kind of research
not
for it?
really. I don't do a lot of research in my writing. I'm more into just, trying to tap into my imagination and come up with as much wild, unpredictable stuff as I can. But there have been a few projects recently where I've been trying to do some research. One was doing research on the combat zone in Boston, which was like, I'm sure you know what it was.
Yeah.
It was like this area where all the crime was, and it's gone now. But it's kind of like the way Times Square was in the old days too. And I'm thinking about setting a story in, the 70s or so forth in the combat zone. And there's also another thing I'm working on, which I'm going to incorporate the history of the guillotine in. So I'm doing some research on that. So I do research, but I don't always. It depends on the topic, and it depends how much I want to go into it as far as, you know, how much imagination, how much reality.
Okay. So what was the biggest challenge that you had in writing and putting out and teach them how to bleed?
There weren't really a lot of challenges. It seemed to go pretty smoothly. Um, it was around the only problem was it was around the time of the pandemic when I was writing it, and everything kind of seemed to like stop for a while, and but then it started up again. So we went back to normal, or as close to normal as we can. And that book in particular seemed to go pretty smoothly. I found a place for it pretty quickly, and it seemed to it seemed to do, okay as far as um, getting attention. People wanted to publish it, so it wasn't like I was searching too long for a publisher. And it has I have got some very positive reactions to it, which I think is kind of cool. I'm happy, and I'm thinking about maybe even doing a sequel at some point.
Wow. Okay. Now, did you have to have an agent or did you just publish it on
I don't
find a
have an
publisher?
agent. I used to at one point, and right now I'm, between agents, I guess. A lot of what I do is small press stuff, so I don't need an agent for that. But I have been doing this for about 20 years, and I do want to eventually do something with a major publisher. So I have been looking into the whole agent thing, but it's very difficult. A lot of times agents, you'll write to them and you'll ask them questions and so forth, and they don't even respond. So it's really been tough lately as far as I don't put too much time into it because if that's time I could be writing. So I do what I can, but if something happens, great. If not, I can continue doing what I'm doing as far as small press writing. I don't have any problem with that.
So what is the major differences between writing for a small press and writing for a major publishing company?
I think in my case, maybe it is I don't have to be as mainstream. I can be a little more unusual. And also I'm sure when you get published by a big company, it's a lot more involved process with the editing process and with just the whole thing is just a different level. And right now, um, things are going smoothly, but like I said, I'd be more than happy to take it to the next level.
Did you have an editor or did you have to do most of the editing yourself?
Um, I edit in my regular life. I have a day job where I'm an editor. So I always do that first. But every publisher, even if it is a small publisher, has their in-house editors. So um, obviously they're going to catch things that you didn't catch and so forth. You have to have editors. I mean, editors are really important. So yeah, everybody has their in-house editors and so forth. And two or three different sets of eyes see everything at least once and catch things that maybe somebody else didn't catch.
Hey, sounds good. So, in your book, Teach Them How to Bleed, what character did you love or hate the most?
Um, hmm. I don't think I hate any of my characters. Even the characters who are the villains, I have a lot of affection for. So I don't think I hate any of my characters. One character in particular I liked was a character named J. It was it JB J. It's been a while since I have read. I've been working on something new recently, but it's LB Jade. And she is a character who changes sexuality and gender occasionally. She is, I guess, what you would call a vampire hunter, but it's a little different in this world. And when she kills a vampire, she takes its heart and she takes various things that will give her powers. So she's been doing this a long time, and she's almost to the level of being not a goddess, but like kind of like like a sorcerer, kind of like a powerful figure. And she tends to take people who are outsiders and who are like isolated and use them as her kind of henchmen. She finds this poor guy who is like the town, not the town idiot, but everybody treats him badly. He has a very low IQ, and she is able to give him a high IQ, which is something totally new that he has never experienced before. And in return, she asks for his help in what she's doing. So I guess I like her because she's an interesting character that um, has an interesting way of interacting with other people and has an agenda that I think is something I want to explore more.
So, are you a pantser or an outliner?
Hmm. All right. I try to outline, but if I outline too much, I lose interest. if I know too much of what's going to happen, sometimes I just abandon a project. So there has to be some level of spontaneity and newness to it to keep me going. That's pretty much what keeps my momentum going. So I have the most barest kind of outline, but I guess for the most part, I am more of a pantser. I do try to, I kind of wing it, but I do try to keep it within a certain I wanted to tell a story and I want the story to progress, but as far as getting there, I try to be um, as original and as spontaneous as I can be.
Do you actually have an end to the story in mind, or do you let the characters kind of go where they need to?
A little bit of both. I do know where the stories are going, but if a character does something I wasn't expecting, I love that, and I'll definitely take it in that direction. The characters sometimes almost seem to have a will of their own, and I'm not going to get in the way of that, especially if it's something that is new, a surprise to me. That's the kind of thing that keeps me writing.
Mhm. Okay. So what else could we expect from you in the near future?
Well, right now I'm working on a couple of books. One is a kind of a mashup of crime fiction and horror, and another one is a kind of a road trip story. But I'm also thinking about maybe doing a sequel to teach them how to bleed. So I guess I'm working on several things at once. I'm not sure which one's going to get done first, but they are kind of like I'm kind of juggling them. And I guess I'm not sure if I have HDAD, whatever that's called, but I do tend to jump around a little bit, and until I get to a point where I really feel like I'm embedded in something, and then I'll stick with it. So I'm basically at that point right now, just trying to see what I'm gonna stick with.
Okay, so you're actually writing many different books at the same time?
Yes, right now I am. I don't
Wow.
always do that, but I had a lot of different ideas, and I wasn't sure which ones are going to be, which ones are going to bear fruit. So I'm kind of cultivating them all at the moment.
I can see that because I can do that myself. I
Yeah,
can see that. Yeah. Okay.
kind of like being a gardener in a way.
Okay. So what is your favorite part about being a writer on the whole writing and publishing process?
Um, well, writing isn't something that I like fell into. It was something that was a part of me from an early age. I remember when I was a little kid, I would like I said, I'd watch horror movies and so forth. And I used to have a notebook and I would write kind of like stories that were like sequels that were like a couple of pages each. I mean, I was a little kid at the time, but it was definitely the beginnings of my writing, and it was I was just learning my craft. And and there have been times in my life where it was difficult to get things published, and um, I even went through a period where I stopped sending things out because I got so many rejections. I just said, I don't want this distracting me. I just want to keep writing. So writing is something that is embedded in me. It's part of who I am. So that's part of what I enjoy the most is when I'm in full crank and I'm totally into something. And I guess I just really enjoy the process if it's going well. If it isn't, it can be kind of painful. And I do think that everybody thinks they can write a book, but it's not that easy. And it's not that easy to write a good book. And I think that it's work. And I think my biggest problem is I have a day job that can often have overtime, and it's kind of like having two jobs, and that kind of gets a little exhausting at times.
Yeah, I think a lot of writers tend to have day jobs. I mean, writing does not pay that well.
It does
So,
not. Someone like Stephen King is like somebody who hit the lottery. I mean, most writers I know are just scraping by if they can make a living at it at all. And the reason why I have a day job is to pay the bills and to have health care and to things like that I could never afford otherwise. So basically, the day job grounds me, and the writing is what I do when I have the time and when I am able to. I try to do
Yeah.
as much as I can.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the whole thing about writing is it's a passion in a way.
It is. It has to
And
be. Otherwise, you won't do it.
right, exactly.
Yeah,
Because the only time you could really do it unless you're, really prolific and you're well known and you publish a lot. You can't make a living at it, really.
it's true.
Yeah,
And the other thing too
unfortunately.
is I started writing pretty early. I sent my first story out when I was in high school. And I had this dopey idea that I was going to be like really prolific, like have a big long career. And I didn't sell anything again until I was like in my 30s. And then finally something seemed to click. But so I'm kind of always feeling like I'm making up for lost time. And I'm always feeling like there's a clock ticking. And I really want to, you know, finish as much work as I can before I'm gone.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. So, what do you consider the most challenging part of the writing process?
The whole time aspect probably, especially when I'm very busy with a day job. It's tough to find a regular routine that can keep me going. And so I try to do as best as I can. But and also there are times, obviously, I mean, not everybody goes through this, but I do have gone through writer's block. During the pandemic, I couldn't write or read for like months. I don't know why. It just kind of sh like shut off in me or something. So, I guess writer's block, things like that are like the mo easily the most horrible part of being a writer.
You're not the only one who's mentioned that the pandemic kind of shut them off.
Well, it's
Yeah.
weird. You think like the pandemic, you're working from home, you have more time. You're saying, "Oh, I have all this time to write now." And then like it just doesn't come. It's just like it just like the crank won't work for a while. And it's very frustrating. And a lot of it, a lot of things like emotion and things like that do affect how creative you are.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
if you're going through like rough times in your real life or sickness or so forth, that can definitely affect your creativity as well. So it's all it's very sensitive machinery. And I just want to make sure that it works as well as it can, but sometimes it just stops and you have to kind of wait for the kind of percolate in your head until it's ready to come out.
Right. So, what has been your favorite adventure during your writing career?
Um, I don't know if there's a specific adventure, but I think the career by itself is kind of an adventure. I've gone through periods where, my first novel came out, I won the Stoker, that was excellent. I've gone through ups and downs since, and the entire thing is interesting. It's kind of like songwriting in a way. All you need is one hit and then that'll work, that'll do it, and people will look at your earlier stuff and so forth. But you have to get that hit, and it's really tough to do. So that's kind of like where I am. I feel that the future could be infinite, but it's just a matter of getting the right luck, the right breaks, and seeing what happens. But the entire thing's an adventure, and I'm always fascinated by where things go and how things continue. So I don't plan to stop writing anytime soon, and I'm going to enjoy this as long as I can.
Good. Okay. So, what is the greatest lesson that you've learned in your writing career?
Um, well, first of all, don't give up. I went through periods of my life where I had got a lot of rejections, and people, didn't seem to want what I was doing. And I started to get down on myself and starting to think, maybe I'm just not that good a writer. But then I kept at it. I kept growing as a writer. I kept trying to, improve my craft and get better and better at it. And, eventually it did pay off. But a lo- it I don't think a lot of I don't know if how I should word this, but I think some people have the drive to keep doing this, but I think that it's difficult for other people. It's not gonna just come to you. So I think writing is a lot more difficult than a lot of people let on.
Mhm. So, is that the only piece of advice that you would want to give to
Um,
other writers?
well, aside from, well, obviously read as much as you possibly can. I've been a voracious reader since I was a little kid. When I was in high school, I sent letters to a lot of my favorite writers. At the time, it was science fiction writers, so it was people like Fritz Leiber, Theodore Sturgeon, Frank Herbert, who wrote Dune. A lot of these people responded, and that definitely lit the fire, kept me going. Um, Also, I guess as far as if you get a rejection, don't necessarily think that that person knows the final answer. One person isn't going to be the decision maker. You could send it somewhere else and they could love it. So definitely don't just give up after like one or two rejections. Keep going, keep writing, keep reading, and just totally immerse yourself in this and um, try to move forward as much as you can.
Forget your rejections. Did people give you any advice on how to change the story?
Not a lot of the times, no. This main period I'm talking about with the rejections was maybe like the 80s and 90s. And mainly got a lot of like form rejections, and that doesn't really help very much because it doesn't
Mm.
really tell you what you're doing wrong and what you need to fix and what you need to get better at. So it's kind of like being in a vacuum. And unfortunately, that's a lot of what being a writer is. It's a lot of it is isolation. It's different now because of social media. We all talk to each other now. We all have friends who are other writers. But there was a time in the past before all this where you kind of felt like you were isolated by yourself and you weren't really getting much in the way of react feedback. So it was really tough to figure out what what your next move should be.
Of
I think things are easier
feedback.
now.
Speaking of feedback, are there any groups, clubs, or organizations that you'd recommend to other writers that may have helped you in your career?
For a while, I was in a writers group, and I think that was a really good experience to get other writers' feedback for what you're doing and giving them feedback as well. So if anybody can join a writers group, I think that's excellent to do. Also, there are a lot of like writers organizations. I belong to the HWA, the Horror Writers Association. Um, I was one of the founding members of the New England Horror Writers. And so there, it's nice that there are these kind of organizations that you can be a part of and feel like you're part of a community. And I think that's really good too. So basically, just try to be as much in contact with other writers and with the outside world as you can, despite the isolating aspects of being a writer.
Okay. Now I have questions about you as a person. So what is
Sure.
one thing that most people don't realize about you?
Hmm. I guess I don't really think I'm that interesting a person. I think I'm more interesting as a writer. And I think that's why I think I express myself better in writing than I do verbally. So I think that that's kind of like, that's my outlet. So I don't know what kind of things are you talking about? I guess if you give me like an example, I get that might help a little bit.
Mm, well, some people say that they're shy or something. And
I'm kind of weird. I'm kind of like introverted and shy in some situations, but if I feel comfortable and I'm around people I feel comfortable with, I am outgoing. So I'm kind of in the middle somewhere. Um, I guess. I mean, I guess that's something some people would know is that can sometimes be kind of difficult to be extroverted, and it takes a lot of effort for me. And sometimes even things like small talk are difficult. It's like I almost wish there was a class I could take, maybe an acting class or something, where I could learn some of these skills that I am not that great at.
there should be some kind of class like that. It's like,
Right?
how
I
to
mean,
do
even for
stuff.
reading. There are some people who are excellent readers and keep your attention, but it's really tough to be like that. A lot of writers who read their own stuff, no, I'm not putting them down or anything because I definitely include myself, but it's not always easy to get like a kind of a rhythm going and things like that. And there have been certain writers who are so good at it. I really wish I could somehow learn from them. Reading is definitely something I wish I was better at.
I'm sure they do have courses in that.
Yeah, that's probably something I can check into.
Oh, yeah, I'm positive there are.
But I remember like the writer Harlan Ellison, I would go see him speak. And he was just he could go on for hours and he was amazing.
Yeah.
And I always envied that.
Yep, be good.
Yeah.
Okay, what questions do you wish interviewers would ask you, and what would your answer be?
Um, hmm. I guess I'm not really I don't really have a question I want anybody to ask me. I on a big part, I try to think like my writing should speak for itself and hopefully communicate something to people. And like I said, I don't think I'm that interesting as a person. So if I have, I think the writing is really what I'm putting out there that I really want people to know about me, that aspect of who I am.
Okay. Um, well, my next question, I think people might be interested in is what are your passions and when you're not writing? And how do you make time to do the things that you love?
Sure. I am very much into music and I'm talking about like all kinds of music. What really got me into music was punk rock in the 70s, but I love everything from jazz to blues to metal. Right now, I really love death metal even. So I mean, there's so many aspects of music I love. So I definitely have a passion for music. I have a passion for movies. I've always loved movies. I did a column called Cinema Knife Fight with another writer for more than 10 years. We even had a website at one point. So I've been writing pretty regularly as far as about movies. On places like Facebook, I regularly write reviews. They're not as in depth as they used to be, but I always try to have something out there as far as recommending movies or maybe letting people know about something they didn't know about or things like that. So movies and writing movies, music. There's a lot of creative arts I just really love. I wish I could paint. At some point, I might try to learn that. So there were a lot of things that I like, but they're all arts related for the most point.
So, what does your writing space look like? And what do you
Okay.
need to have around you when you're writing or editing?
We have an extra bedroom, which we've turned into an office. And this is where I do all the writing. And this is also where I do my day job because I work from home. So I have a desk, I have a laptop, a couple of extra monitors, and nothing fancy, nothing exciting, but it is like a space that set aside just for writing, just for working. And I like having that. It doesn't differentiate between work and life, but it does kind of give me a space that's just, you know, just for writing and that I can leave when I need to just be decompressed or so forth.
Do you have any food or drink that you need to have with you?
Not really. Maybe in the past, I used to drink alcohol a little more when I was writing, and sometimes that would loosen things up a little bit, and it did help. But I don't tend to do that as much now. Also, while I love music, sometimes I guess it depends what I'm working on. Sometimes music helps, but then other times I just want silence. So I think it depends on the project itself and what I feel I need to do.
Does the type of music also depend on the project?
Yeah, a lot of the real action-oriented or even maybe violent stuff, definitely more rock kind of music. But I also love a lot of film soundtracks. I also love even classical at different points. It really has to do with the mood I'm trying to create. It helps me do that. But like I said, I have noticed that recently I have been through, different periods where I just don't want any music at all. So it all really depends on how I'm feeling at the moment.
Hmm. Okay. The writers often have furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companions to help them with their work. And do you have any? And do they help or hinder you?
Um, Throughout my life, I've actually had about three iguanas. The reason why I have them is I'm allergic to dogs and cats,
Oh,
and I wanted a pet who's as big as maybe a cat or something like that, that won't make me sick. And I came upon iguanas. They're affectionate. They're much more friendly than people think they are, and I've just had a real connection with them. So I haven't had them all at the same time. As one dies, I'll get another one. And they live about 15, 20 years each. So I've been ha the current one I have right now is named Osiris. I've had him about 3 years. I'm not really sure what he contributes to my writing, but he is kind of like a comfort animal, like as far as, if things are rough or something like that, it is great to have a pet. I think you really kind of have, if people don't have pets, I guess I'm a little suspicious of them because I just think like you have to have something that you really care about. I don't have kids, so the pet fills the void. Um, I guess the void isn't big enough for a kid, but it's big enough for an iguana, and that seems to be just fine with me. Also, my wife is a writer as well, so that kind of it's kind of cool because you understand each other really well. Sometimes it gets competitive, but most of the time it's a good thing, and I do that also helps too. We've written things together and things like that. So um, between my wife and my iguana, I'm doing fine.
That's great. So, how important has the New England setting been to your writing?
Um, I could say not much, but there are a lot of things I've written that are set there. And my book Buried in Blue Clay, which is my fourth novel, takes place in a city called Blue Clay, which is similar to a city I grew up in Massachusetts called New Bedford. It's about the same size and same population. And some of the locations come from my childhood. They're a little personal as far as just keeping track of where things are geographically. But Blue Clay is definitely a place that I've gone to in several of my stories as well, and I definitely see myself going back there again at some point. So that is a New England setting that definitely is important to me. Some of my other stuff, maybe the New England setting isn't as important, but I definitely do seem to be drawn to I don't know, something about New England. There is a mythology to it. There is a lore, and it just seems conducive to creativity and writing.
Especially horror.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, I just have two more questions for you.
Sure.
Where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester? And we can get your books. Some of your books anyway. If people call us at 508-796-5613, or you can email us at orders@anniesbooksworcester.com. And where else can people find your books?
Um, because a lot of them are small press books, they're not in a lot of the big name bookstores, but I'm sure they're in some of the smaller ones. They're also available in the usual places like Amazon and Barnes and Noble. On Amazon, I even have an author page which lists all my books that are available and so forth. So let me see. I just wanted to, as far as the different places you can find me. I do have a website at www.llsoares.com. I'm on Facebook. Just look up LL Soares. I'm currently on BlueSky. I'm not on X. And then the Amazon author page is www.amazon.com/stores/author. And then it's a big long thing. It's BOO7 DIRXBG. And maybe I can also send these addresses to you in an email to put like in a comment below the interview, just so people can, they'll still be there if people want to check
Right,
out
I can put
something.
it in there.
Sure.
Okay, great. Well, you answered my second question there too.
Oh,
So,
cool, cool.
anyways,
I
well,
really
this
want to thank you for inviting me to do this. I really love Annie's Bookstop, and I love any bookstore that definitely is, um, you know, has a horror section, a really good horror section, and I definitely think stores like yours are terrific, and I really cannot praise your store enough.
oh, great. Thank you. Thank you. It is a great story.
It is.
Anyway, thank you so much, L Source.
Thank
Um,
you.
and maybe we'll be seeing you around someday.
I hope so. And
Thanks.
maybe we'll talk again at some point, Selena. That'd be very nice.
It's been nice having you. Thanks.
Thank you.